Hey everyone, my name's Chant and welcome back to, well, that's not right. Welcome to a trigger tutorial. The first time. Let's start over. Hi everyone, my name's Chant and welcome to a trigger tutorial for Planet Coaster. Alright, I got the intro this time. Alright, so before we get into it, I just want to explain that while I tried my best to cover everything that a sequencer can do and how to trigger, I probably missed some stuff. So if you guys want to let me know what I missed in the comments below, and if there's enough of those kinds of comments, I might create a trigger tutorial number 2. But for now, let me tell you how this video is going to be laid out. I've divided it into 4 sections. The first section is basics, then multiple triggers and trigger options. After that, we will take a look at the use of multiple sequencers. And lastly, and probably the most important one, I will discuss tips and tricks I have come across. Now, like I said before, I want you guys to comment below and discuss the things that I may have missed, or if you guys have tips and tricks that you have and that I didn't cover. I would love to hear from you guys, and frankly, we can all learn from it in the comments below. Okay, with all that said, let's jump into the basics. Okay, off the bat, I want you to notice that when you click on your display sequencer, you can click on the name of it and change the name, and that's a good habit to get into, especially if you're going to use a lot of sequencers. We're going to call this Special Effects Audio, and whatever you name it, you'll want it to reflect what it does. Now, here is where you can choose a song that the game provides. There's a long list of it. Or you can go over here to user music, where you will have input your music files in your Planet Coaster files on your computer, and you can choose your custom music. On the last tab there, we have favorites. And what you can do for the Planet Coaster music is you can click the star on the left, and it will show up in your favorites. Now, if you pick a song, it will play for the duration of the sequencer. So basically, say we're doing a fireworks show, we will want some music to go with it. So we'll go ahead and pick one, and it'll play for the duration of the fireworks. However, if we're just triggering some lights on and off, we probably don't want music with that, and there is an option for that at the very top, no music. Next, we're going to take a look at the button below that, called Edit Speakers. Clicking on that, it will automatically give you a mass select tool, so that you can click multiple speakers at once. Now, if you read the words there, connect display speakers. And I have 4 speakers sitting here from the game, and only one of them is highlighting. So only one of them is clickable. I'll even try mass selecting them all, but it only registers that one there, and that's because it is a display speaker. The display speaker is a unique speaker in-game, because it is the only one that will connect to this sequencer under audio. And the only thing that this speaker does is it plays for the duration that music you chose for that sequencer. So for that fireworks show that we're doing, and we've got that music playing, we'll probably want to use a few display speakers to put around the park, and it will play exactly the same time and for the exact duration of your show. And this is the only time and the only place where you will use a display speaker. But they're very helpful. Next, we have the Finances tab, and I'm not going to review that with you since there's nothing that you can personally trigger here or press. In the next button, we have something called Cameras. And so we are going to go ahead and click Edit Cameras. We're going to choose a view, and you would choose a view of your show, not the speakers, but we're going to take a view of the speakers and press Add Camera. Then we can move again if we'd like. Let's go around the other side and press Add Camera. And just for kicks, one more. Up in the air, just like that. Add Camera. And then we can press Done. Now, what this does is when you press the camera down here, enter display camera mode on the sequencer, it will put you in those predetermined destinations, and you can cycle through all the angles. So if you want someone to view your show in a specific way, this is a great way to show them how and where to set up. This is not necessary, especially if you just have a general show, but it's still something fun that you can do. We're going to skip the scheduler button and go straight to the overview. And we are going to make a trigger sequence. So click Make Trigger Sequence, and then click Add Display Group. You'll notice that this is also nameable, and I do suggest that. So we're going to call it, I don't know, fire. Okay, now we have some fire. So under this display group, we're going to connect objects to it. It'll automatically give you a mass select tool. So I will mass select the fire only. It will automatically name the objects for you as to what they are, and normally I would not suggest changing this, but there are occasions where you might want to number these 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., just to keep better track of them and to make it easier to trigger them with the time and other effects that you can do. But for now, let's stick to the basics. So we just created a display group and with 3 added items. Here we can change the times that they trigger. 1, 2, 3. Actually, let's put that in order. That is in order, okay. And to test them, we can press the play button right next to fire, right here. 1, 2, 3. You can also click these individually to press play. This can come in handy if you have a lot of items on the list and you don't know which one is which, and you just press play and it sometimes pops up depending on what you're using. It's also good to note that when you hover over one of these items, the game outlines it for you. So if you're looking for one object in particular to move or delete or change, you can go and highlight it. Also, you can press this button here at the 3 dots, and then you can press this locator button, and it should point you in the direction. Let's click on it and see what it does. There we go. It centers it to your screen so you have a better idea of where that item is hiding. Alright, now that we've done that, let's click Done and go to that button that we skipped earlier called Scheduler. It's good to note that the sequencer itself is triggerable, so you can trigger it on a coaster, or you can trigger it through other sequencers. Self-activation type. It is automatically set to activate only on trigger, which means you'd have to trigger on a ride or, like I said, on a different sequencer. And there's a lot of different options here. Looping and on trigger means it will just continuously cycle after it triggers. At specific times, you can have it trigger at 8 o'clock at night. If it's a fireworks show, that would be perfect. And lastly, continuous activation, which is something I often use and is something that is quite helpful. So we'll just click continuous activation. And literally, it will just keep looping whatever you've created. Just a couple more things for the basics of a sequencer. The buttons down at the bottom here. You can see that it is recolorable, and what is recolorable is simply the sequencer itself. You'll see it change color there. Next is the play button. And this is just another way to test it, or if you have a show that you want people to see, but you also want them to trigger it themselves, you would just leave the sequencer like this, not connected to any building, so that the person viewing your park or show can simply click on it and click this button. The next button is a select all, and what it does is it selects everything connected to the sequencer. You'll see that it includes the display speaker that we connected earlier. While it's not necessarily triggered, it is part of this sequence. After that, we have the camera display mode, which I showed you earlier. You can predetermine set locations for people to view your show, and all they have to do is click that button. You might have to let them know that you've set them up, because I don't think people necessarily look for that. The next 5 buttons are general tools in Planet Coaster, so I won't go over those. Okay, next we're going to be looking at the multiple triggers and trigger options. Right away, you'll see that we're in a new place with some new triggerable items, and nothing is triggered. Let's fix that by making a trigger sequence. But first, let's name this Western Steam. Not very specific, but still good to name a sequencer. Clicking on making a sequence, adding a display, I'm going to name this Cowboys. And I'm going to click this one, and then I'm going to press Control and hold down Control and click the other cowboy. That way I've got them both without having to mass select all of these triggerable items. And I'll hit Confirm. Adding them to their own group and to the sequencer will turn them off. So now we have to trigger them in order for them to react. Let's add another display group. Call this one Scorpion. Again, I'll just click it and confirm. We're going to add 2 more display groups. We'll call this one Panels and add 2 panels. Oh, if we can click them. No, it's fine. We're just recording panels. All right, confirm. And then the last one, we're going to call it Barrel. Alright, now that we've got all these triggered, nothing is moving, everything is static and waiting to be triggered into a marvelous show. So we've connected multiple triggers and we have organized them in a way that is easy to comprehend. So if I wanted to trigger these in a timed sequence, I could do that now. Say I wanted the Cowboys to happen first. I would leave that at 0 seconds. I want the Scorpions to go off at about 2 seconds. And then I want the Barrel to go off at 4. The panels won't do anything because we have to trigger them in a more advanced way. So we'll get to those panels in a second. For now, let's take a look at how these timed sequencers work out by pressing play. Perfect! That's exactly what I timed. And I'm not gonna lie, when I set this up, I really wanted a triggerable tumbleweed. So, Frontier, tumbleweeds. Alright, hold the phone. Who put the lantern there? Okay, well, since there's a lantern there, let's hook it up to the sequencer. Add new lantern. Connect the object. And we'll take a closer look at it in the advanced options, or basically the 3 dots right next to the item itself here. Because this is a light, it has perhaps some different options than other items. You see activate on trigger, deactivate on trigger, repeat toggle on trigger. If we go up to the Cowboys, they don't have those. They have change color on trigger, restore color on trigger, swap color on trigger. So when you are triggering items, you really want to pay attention to what you can and cannot do with them. It will change on the item, depending on the item. So let's play with activate on trigger, and it says what it does when you hover over it. It says turn on indefinitely when triggered. Well, that's pretty self-explanatory. You can turn it off, and whenever you trigger it, it will stay on. But then there's a button to deactivate on trigger. So you can trigger it twice to go on whenever you want and then off a set amount of seconds later. And then there's something called repeat toggle on trigger. So let's go ahead and click that. And it comes with toggle every 1 second for 3 seconds total. So it'll turn on and off about 3 times. We'll turn off the lights and play that so you can see that. Again, we'll just play this display group here. The new toggle on trigger feature is really a great asset to the game, and I'm glad they put that in there. So if you need a flickering light or if you need a strobe light type of feature, it's very easy to accomplish with this, especially with the adjustable timing that you have. Alright, so that explains activate on trigger, deactivate on trigger, and repeat toggle on trigger. Now the Catboys had something else. They had change color, restore color, and swap color. And in order to show that, we are going to use the panels that I put down. So you'll see it has all of the options. And we already went through activate and deactivate on trigger. And we also went over repeat toggle on trigger. So we will be looking at the last three here. Change color on trigger. So basically, change color on trigger is the same thing as activate on trigger, only we are literally changing the color. And this is something we have to manually do. So we're going to go ahead and click that. And you'll see here an option to change the color. So it's brown right now, and we want it to go to green. And there's also a feature here to fade to color. We'll go ahead and fade it. And we'll make it take 5 seconds to fade. We'll close that. And we'll go ahead and play. Perfect! Now it's green. The problem is that was only an activate. There is no deactivate until you trigger that. So it's permanently green unless we change that right here, right now. So in order to change this, we're going to duplicate this. And again, we'll go into that advanced options button, the three dots, and up at the top is a button to duplicate. Go ahead and press that. We're going to rename this one just to show that it's different than that other panel sitting there. We'll call it 1. Now, I don't know if you saw that, but that was very important. Because we had it twice, it changed the name of the object. And it changes the name of the object itself, so that in every instance where it is triggered, it will come up with that name for that object. So we'll call it this object so you can see the change again. And it changed down there again. So now we know we're triggering the correct thing. This was change color on trigger, and this one's going to be restore color on trigger. Automatically it will restore to brown as it recalls the color that we initially used. And we will have this come about 6 seconds later. And we'll have the fade time at 2 seconds. So let's go ahead and play that and see what it looks like. There, it activates the color change. And deactivates back to the brown. And like I said, in order to achieve that, we had to make 2 triggers. Now for this other panel, we're going to mess with the last option. And that is swap color on trigger. And it is the option I use all the time. It basically does exactly what we just did, only using 1 trigger. So let's go ahead and click that. Again, we're going to make this green. And we're going to play it for 5 seconds, and the fade time always automatically comes up with half of the amount of time that you play it for. So if I had put in 10 seconds, it would change to 5. And you can change this manually if you want. Just change the play forward to 3, and we can change the fade time to whatever we want. We'll put it at, okay, 1.1. So we'll go ahead and just play that one on the right. As you can see, it was a very quick trigger. So we'll increase it to 5 seconds, or even 6, or 7, because that's what I pressed. And we will play it again. The fade time on that was really quick, so it changed colors swiftly, and then it takes the same amount of fade time that you put in order to change it back. And again, that's done with 1 trigger. Now each one serves its own purpose, and depending on what kind of triggering you do, you may want to choose one or the other, to activate and deactivate, or to simply swap. I think that covers multiple triggers and multiple trigger options. Let me know if you guys can think of anything else in the comments below. one more thing I'd like to say before we leave this section is that the reason why I added so many display groups was to keep as organized as possible. Also, and I'll probably mention this in tips and tricks, is by separating everything into these display groups, I'm able to then copy that entire display group, duplicate it. So look, we have another Cowboys, and we can call it Cowboys 2. And I can re-trigger them for 5, 10, 15 seconds later, and without having to recreate a display group with them in it. So it makes it very easy to do an entire show with the same things over and over again without triggering them necessarily again and again. So let's go ahead and duplicate the panels display group. We'll call it panels 2. And what I want you to notice is that when you go to the advanced options, the 3 dots, it keeps exactly what you've already triggered. So you don't have to redo the work. And if you want to fade it to a new color, actually let's try it on this one. Let's try pink. And we're going to go ahead and play the whole show. And I want you to keep an eye on those panels and see if this one right here will turn pink after it's already gone from brown to green to brown. There it goes. So I did not have to re-trigger that. I did not have to manually go in and time it and everything because I had already done that. Now, this won't necessarily work if you want it for different times, and you have to go in anyway and change everything by hand anyway. But if you initially trigger it how you'd like it throughout the entire show, you can simply duplicate it and easily just change the color. Alright, let's take a look at multiple sequencers. As you can see here, I have multiple sequencers, and not only that, but there are more. All of these have already been triggered, they have things connected to them, and they all do something. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a master sequencer and trigger all of these in order to make ourselves a show. So let's go ahead and place down a master sequencer. And that's exactly what we will call it. Before we start adding things, I will show you a couple of the pre-done sequences. Let's take a look at lightning. So that one was just where the lightning was all at once. And if we go down to this next sequencer down here, it says lightning 2. So let's play that one. Okay, so it goes in a small quick circle for lightning 2. And there's another sequencer below that, and it says lightning 3, so let's see what that does. It goes in a much slower circle. So with the very same lightning effects, we've created 3 different triggers. Let's go to the fire. Again, you'll see something similar. This says fire 1, we'll play it, they all go on at once. This one says fire 2. It goes in a quick circle. Fire 3, a much slower circle. And this says fire 1, 10 seconds. So based off of that title, I assume, like fire 1, it'll turn on all at once, and it will last for 10 seconds. Let's play it. And yeah, I'd say that's exactly what it does. Now over here we have red star 2, below that green star 2, and over here we have red star, and then below that green star. These are, well, let's just play them and find out. We'll start with red star, green star, red star 2, and green star 2. I hope you were paying attention over there at the floor because they each turned on their own with a sequence of about 4 items. The rest of these kind of follow suit. Alright, so let's hop into connecting multiple sequencers and making a show. So off the bat, I'm just going to name the first one, and I'm going to call it Sun. You can click on these before you actually confirm them. And you can read the titles that you've put on it. So, do I want Sun 1, Sun 2, Sun 3? What's Center Sun? And you know what? For that matter, there's moons over here. This one says moon, this one says yellow moon. So we'll connect yellow moon, moon, Sun 3, and Sun Center. Confirm. Now, you can play them individually, as I've mentioned before. So we'll play Center Sun and see what that looks like. Yellow moon. Ah, it connects the sun there. Do you see? Oof. Alright. And just moon. Alright. And Sun 3. Ooh. Alright. So off the bat, I'm going to get rid of moon. I will trigger that first by 1 second. And trigger the moon yellow and center sun at the same time. So let's play them all together. Very good. Let's add another group. We'll call it Storm. Connect objects. Now, where was that lightning? Here it is. Okay, let's connect Lightning 1 and Lightning 2. Is there anything else I want to add? Yeah, we'll connect something called Ghosts. Why not? And we'll confirm that. So let's click Ghosts and see what it does. Okay, very good. And Lightning 1 is all at once. Lightning 2 is, I think, quick succession. Yeah. So we're going to trigger the Ghost and Lightning 1 at the same time. Then we'll trigger Lightning 2 at about 3 seconds, if it lets us. The actual lightning object that we've connected to these triggers, it has its own loop timer, right? And it may be 3 seconds in duration, which means it won't play again until those 3 seconds are up. So here, let's put this at 2 seconds, and you'll see that the lightning will probably only go off once. Yep, it only went off once because we didn't give it enough time to reset. So we'll place it at 4 seconds, and the lightning should go off twice now, okay? Let's play it again. There's one. And there it is again. Alright, so we've given enough time, and I like how that looks, so we're going to leave that there. However, if we play this overall, it all goes off at the same time, and I don't want that. I want the storm to come after the sun. So we're going to play Storm at about 5 seconds as a display group. Press play. Ah, that's really good timing. Okay, let's add yet again another sequence. We'll call this Moon. Moon 10 seconds, moon yellow, moon. I think moon yellow is only really supposed to go with the sun. That says purple. I like purple. Let's click that and add that to our show. Let's use these. These are firefly / stars. And we'll just use the first one, not the 10-second one, as it mentioned in the title of it. So confirm. Let's get rid of 10-second moon. I know that's going to be already too long for this short sequence. So we'll play the purple first, the moon 1 second after that, and the firefly stars can start right there. Let's play the whole sequence for that display group. Very, very pretty. I'm actually going to delay purple by 1 and the moon by 2.5. 2.5. And again, I need to place this entire group another 5 seconds behind Storm. So 10 seconds overall. In the last group, we're going to make it stars. And we're just going to connect the 4 items there. In order to know which one's which, we can press the play button on each. We'll put that at 1 second, 2, 3, and 4. Now it turned out to be in a pretty good order already. So it should just go in a basic circle that way around. And we're actually going to stick this somewhere between moon and storm, so let's place it at 7 seconds overall in the display group. Let's press sort all to get it in order. And there we have it, sun, storm, stars, moon. So let's go ahead and play it and see what it looks like. Beautiful. There we go. So this was just an example of how to use multiple triggers and multiple sequencers and use one master sequencer to put them all together. This is extremely helpful, especially if you're putting together a roller coaster or ride that requires a ton of triggers. Now, a coaster or a ride has a limit of 50 triggers you can connect to it. So as I've shown you here, you can connect as many sequencers as you want, up to I think 100 sequencers, to one sequencer. And then you can connect that one sequencer to your ride. And that really helps save you on the limited triggers that rides have. And while this display of triggering sequencers with sequencers may have been lengthy, the idea in showing you this show, or the process of making the show, was to get you guys to understand how useful several sequencers can really be, especially when you need a variety of different sequences or a variety of sequences in different orders. Now, some of these sequencers only have, let's see, a couple of triggers attached. This one has a total of 5 triggers in it, and I've used one whole sequencer to do it. But because I made it a separate sequencer, I can add or delete it without interrupting anything else. If I had sequenced it with the sun, but I only wanted the sun, but too late, I already triggered it with these fireflies, I would have to go in and manually change it or manually re-add the sun in order to have just the sun. So separating it out is really, really useful, really helpful, and keeps you very organized. Okay, let's dive into tips and tricks. One of the first things I want to show you is duplicating sequencers. Earlier in one of the other sections of this video, I showed you how to duplicate a display group and the benefits in doing just that. Let me show you here in the Sunbeams 2 sequencer. I have 48 things connected to the sequencer, but we're going to go ahead and duplicate this. And there they are again, and they are triggered exactly the same as the one above because we duplicated it exactly. We'll call it Sunbeams delete me. And earlier I showed you the benefits of doing this. You can, since everything's already triggered, you can simply change the color if that's what you wanted to do. And then that's all you have to do for each and every one. And it seems like a lot of work, but it actually saves you a lot of work by doing this. So duplicating is a great tool. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Now the way I set all these up is that I added all these to a sequencer. As you can see here, Lightning 1, I just added them all and I didn't trigger them at all. So I can just press play and they go all at once. In order to make the other lightning sequences, I simply duplicated this, Control X, and added something to the title to show that it was something else. So we'll call it Lightning Delay. Right now it's the same exact sequence because we haven't changed anything. But we're going to go ahead and go in here. I've already named all the lightning effects, 1 through 8 it looks like. So it's easy to tell which one I want to trigger first so that it goes in a specific order. So I'm going to go ahead and trigger these 1 second apart. And like I said, since they're numbered, I know exactly which ones to trigger for the time that I want them to be triggered. I'm getting really tired. I hope you guys can't hear it in my voice too much. Alright, so I just triggered all these. We'll press sort all. And then we can play here. Now they are all 1 second apart. And it was very easy. I did not have to reconnect them to a different sequencer. I didn't have to reset it all up. I simply duplicated and renamed it and changed it slightly. So now I have two very different effects with the same special effect, if you will. The next tip I'm going to give you is to change the color of things after you've triggered them. Alright, let me explain what I mean here. Say I want all of these panels to trigger to the color red. Well, they're already red, so what are you talking about, Chant? Well, I want them to trigger to that color. I want them to be black, but I want them to turn red for a little bit with the swap color option. Alright, so let's keep them red for now. We'll connect all of them. And we will go to swap color. And we'll keep what other settings they give us. We don't have to change that, but we'll press swap color for all of them. And you'll notice right here, it keeps that color red. So if I press play, nothing's going to happen because, yeah, they're already red. But now that we've triggered them all, and all we had to do was press swap color, we're going to mask select them, actually put them in a group. Then we'll mask select them in a group and change their color to black. Well, hey, that's going to mess with the trigger. You just triggered it red. What's going on? Well, it keeps the trigger, so it goes red. Only now you do not have to go in and manually change this color to the color you want to swap it to, because they were that color when you triggered them. So like I said, that is a really big time saver. And while this trick worked for these panels, it won't work for everything. These panels all work together and I was able to change them all because they are the same object and can be recolored at the same time. If I had a piece of wood and a dragon, I probably would not be able to recolor them at the same time and do this quick mass recolor. So this trick, again, is very specific, but definitely something to keep in mind. The next thing I'm going to mention is blueprinting sequencers. So let's go check out my blueprints. Let's type in star, and here you'll see something I've already created. I think that's, where's the sequencer for this? This is, there it is. Alright, and so we'll press play. So that was a blueprinted sequencer. Now I've just mentioned duplicating sequencers, so why wouldn't that work for this? And why would we have to blueprint it? Well, let's go ahead and Control X and copy exactly that with the sequencer. And then it should work, right? Well, let's play this new sequencer. Oh, but look at that. It plays what it was connected to originally. And that is still over there, which is why that duplicating sequencer thing works, is that it stays connected to those items. But it does not work if you duplicate those items and the sequencer. So you'll want to blueprint a sequencer along with its sequence in order to have multiples of it. Say I want a whole bunch of stars. Well, just duplicate that and place down a bunch of stars. You'll have a bunch of sequencers to work with. But again, you can make a master sequencer and have them all go off at once. There we go. Finding hiding items. This is something I mentioned pretty early on in my video, but I'm going to mention it again. If you can't find an item that you really want to trigger again, and it's buried already in all of these sequence things, and you just can't find it because they're overlapping, and you're having a headache trying to click it, you can go into where it's already triggered and you can hover over each item and it'll show you where that item is. Furthermore, you can click on the advanced options or the 3 dots next to that item and click this toggle button right here. And it should center it on your screen, not by much, but if you center it on your screen and zoom in, you'll have a better chance of grasping the item that you want. So using a sequencer to find a hidden item is very useful. Let's say you added a bunch of lights to a project. You never triggered them, you did not add them to a sequencer, but all of a sudden you don't like your lighting, and it's all connected into one building and you can't find it. Well, you can get out a sequencer, you can mass select and go over your building and connect all the lights and then go through them and find that 1 or 2 lights that you just really didn't want. And that way it's easier to find and easier to delete. And it's a tip that doesn't really have much to do with triggering or sequencers, but it can be helpful. Turning off multiple objects. Again, this tip is not very useful when coming to actual triggers and sequences. However, it can be useful if you want these moving items just to be still, static, and not moving at all. So basically, in order to turn all of these off, you could click on each one and then click this button called Activate on Trigger. And go through all of these and click that button. Or you could simply place down a sequencer, make a triggered sequence, add display group, connect all these objects to that display group, and it will automatically turn them all off. And because this sequencer under scheduler is set activate only on trigger, just like when you click this activate on trigger, it will remain off unless you trigger it, and you never have to. But it is a quick way to mass turn off items. When it came to the audio for that floor show I made for you, I connected the song Goblins and Gobstoppers, an in-game song, to the master sequencer. For all of those other sequencers that I used, I turned the sound off. For the master sequencer, I added 2 park speaker displays in order to play that song wherever I wanted to place those speakers. I placed them up here at the very top because I wanted you guys to view the show from the top. So there they are. Now at the very beginning, in the basics section, I told you that the audio would play for as long as the duration of your sequencer. But I want to point something out. Let's go into Edit Trigger Sequences. Here's the very last ignore the end music one. Here's the very last sequence that happens, and it happens at 37 seconds. And the last trigger in it is at 4 seconds. So at 41 seconds, so that 37 plus 4, at 41 seconds, the music would cut off. But at 41 seconds, this just starts. That just begins. So the show's not over at 41, but the music would end. So I had to add another trigger. This trigger is just a light that I've colored black, so you don't see it when it turns on. But I've triggered it at 50 seconds, so that's when the music will end. And that way the music just doesn't cut off when my show's not quite over. And that's something to keep in mind if your music starts cutting off early and you're saying, hey, wait, there's still a couple more fireworks in the air, why did you turn that off? You can just add another trigger, whatever you want, a black light, and trigger it for when exactly you want the music to end. Now, some of you might recognize this sequence from my Luigi's Mansion project. And while there's nothing crazy here, I did want to point out to you the sequence that I've used. Again, I named each and every display group, and while these may not mean much to you, G, W, B, boom, end, it meant everything to me. It was enough for me to understand what I was working on. G is green, W is white, B is black. The boom is the effect that happens at the end of the transition of white to black, really. And the end was just a light that I needed to extend the trigger because I think I had it on repeat. So in the end, that's not helpful, but let's take a look at the sequence. It fades into green, then quickly fades into white, then black. What I wanted to point out to you was over here the sequence of numbers. The green triggers at 2 seconds, the white at 8, the black at 9, the boom at 9.2. And this sequence is something I used for every single ghost in Luigi's Mansion. I may have tweaked it, but generally, this is the exact sequence, 2, 8, 9, 9.2. And by keeping that consistent with every single trigger and every single ghost, it was easy for me to keep track of and to understand what I was building. Also, it made it easier because then I didn't have to create something new every single time I wanted to trigger a ghost. So the trick here is if you're going to have multiple sections that are similar, but need to have a different sequencer, then come up with a pattern of your own. A pattern of seconds of timing in order to make it easier on yourself.
Alright everybody, that's going to wrap it up for this tutorial. I really hope that some of you found it helpful. It's been a while since I was new at triggering, so I really hope that I covered the basics well enough for you beginners. I know that I missed some things, including one of the newest features that Frontier put into the game, and that would be the color filters. You can now trigger the color filters over your screen. I also did not cover the day-night sequencer, that's the smaller sequencer in the game, which controls the sky, allowing you to make it dark when you're inside and lighter when you're outside. Very useful. And these are something that maybe I will approach if I choose to do a trigger tutorial too. It kind of depends how well you guys like this first tutorial. Well, I know that this was a lengthy video, but frankly I feel like I chopped it down well enough. I probably could have talked another hour on triggers. I feel very afraid that this is probably boring to a lot of you, but hopefully if you stick through it, or you skip through it, you'll find something that maybe you hadn't known and maybe learn some new things. Well, if you liked the video, be sure to leave a comment below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye now.